Well, hello everybody and Happy New Year from the Hilltop Pillbox here in Abbotsford, British Columbia, Canada. And today we've got a bit of a two-part video going on. The first part is going to be, since we're kicking off the new year, we're going to kick off a new feature on the Hilltop Pillbox. And that is going to be called, drumroll please, the Final Analysis. If you can think of a better title for this, please let me know. We're working on very little sleep here. But the final analysis, as everybody says, in the final analysis, well, the final analysis for Axis and Allies comes on the last dice roll. That's when you find out if it was a good idea or not. And so, if you've seen any of my other past couple of videos, I've included this sort of a mock battle, and then everybody can weigh in as to who they think will win and what will be left. And so I'm going to turn this into something, and not sure, maybe once a month or something I'll do a giveaway. I have been so blessed by people responding to a pretty acute need for my son in university recently, and people responded by buying a bunch of my games, and by, as you know, Doug at Historical Board Gaming is very generous offer to match the winning bid when I had to sell my 36 game and all the units and all the expansions and all the markers and all that kind of stuff. And so he matched that, and so we were able to help our son out there in a real and important way, a real tangible way. So again, thanks so much to Doug, and also to John in New York for the winning bid. And again, other people bought a bunch of my games, so my game shelf is getting a little less tall. There's a few games missing, and there's another game shelf behind me that's kind of taken a beating in that sense, but it's a real blessing. And so what I'm going to do here is we're gonna have this battle between America and Germany, and going to let you know that there will be a prize. But here are the two things. You need to tell me in the comments below who wins. Okay, so of course your choices are USA or Germany, but what's remaining? Now, some people were asking before, well, are they trying to take the territory or just wipe them out? Well, in the spirit of World War II, this is a destroy mission, not a take territory mission. I guess that might even be more in the Vietnam thing. But this is just going to be, we're trying to wipe you out. Okay? So we have, on the American side, we have 20 units. On the German side, we have 20 units. And this is about as close as it gets as far as results go. I'm just going to show you my phone here. This is Battle Calc. That's the name of the app I use. And so I've put this stuff in, and we've got a chance to win for the attacker, the Americans, 49.38% to 48.38%, and then a 2.24% chance to draw. So that's about as close as you can get. And yeah, I feel pretty good about that. Adding an infantry either way really kind of jumps it for some reason, but this is what we settle on, and it's 20 each. Now, we're not having any anti-aircraft, so the planes that you see here are the planes that you see. Alright, so there's no anti-aircraft going to knock them out before they get to the fight. So, again, I'll just put this over here and you can see what you got. So let me know what you think. And again, this is a destroy mission. So the Americans, if they're down to one unit, it's going to be a Strat bomber. It's not going to be hanging onto a tank because they want to take the territory. The reason I do that, folks, is because the battle calculator does not care about taking territory. It cares about destruction. So it just eliminates, starting from this end all the way down, eliminates things by their offensive punch. Same with defense. Defense obviously will go that way. with their punch. All right. So we're going to roll this out, but you're not going to know who wins until my next video. And on Saturday, I'm hoping finally to be able to get Buddy together, and we're going to do a little bit of Axis and Allies and Zombies. And we'll he may change his mind though. He may want to do Anniversary or something. But we'll let you know then, of course. And we'll also let you know the results of the final analysis. We'll give it a Dutch angle there. All right. So, yeah, go ahead and put your answers down. Again, just a reminder, this is not a take territory. All right. We'll be right back with the actual game that we're playing today at the Hilltop Pillbox. So if you are the closest or bang on to the correct answers of who wins and what's remaining for a destruction mission, of course, not a take territory, then you will win this nifty little military package. And we'll just let you know what's in here. We've got some infantry, got some motorized, some mechanized, and some armor here. Got a couple of tactical bombers, a strategic bomber, a transport, very useful in 36, and a couple of fighters. And then you also have your destroyer, you have a light carrier, it's not a fleet carrier, it's a light carrier, and a couple of coastal battleships, or you could treat them as cruisers or heavy cruisers, depending on what version you're playing. So whomever is the closest in the final analysis, you will receive this. So good luck to everybody. We're going to roll out the battle and we'll let you know who wins in our next video. Alright, so stay tuned and we're going to do a little game of I think we're playing 1914 today. Alright, we'll be right back. Alright, so here we are with World War I, ready to go. Axis and Allies 1914. And it's all set up and raring to go, and we'll just have to wait and see how it turns out. Now, we have discovered, as many of my subs have, and many people all around YouTube land and Axis and Allies land have discovered, is that this game is tremendously unbalanced. Even with the Russian Revolution rule, the Central Powers struggle to win in this game. There have been some good strategy videos put out there about how to take Paris, and those strategies have been tested, and it still is very difficult for the Central Powers to pull out a victory. So we were talking recently about what can we do to make this game a little less of a foregone conclusion, because essentially what it turns into is if you know, you're gonna play 5, 6, 7 hours of this game, and 9 times out of 10, I don't think that's hyperbole, it ends up with an Entente victory. The Americans, you know, start bringing their units over from North America, and you know, just get a steady stream of stuff going on there. And if Italy holds on, that is a bit of a key actually, is if Italy holds, then there's very little chance, because they can't get through on the south, and the north gets clogged up, of course. So we were wondering, what is something that we can do? And we threw about a bunch of ideas. One of the ideas we had was that in the first round only, Germany goes second. So it'd be Austria-Hungary, then Germany, then Russia, and then France, and on to the rest of the game. And then in the second round it would be Austria-Hungary, then Russia, so you'd go back to the original thing. But then we thought, well, that's not good, because this would definitely fold, and you'd probably have a good stack of a multinational force there, and that would just force Moscow into strictly turtle mode. They really need to have that first turn to somehow get some troops up into Poland here to slow down the German onslaught and make the Germans commit more, so they're committing less over in France. So we thought about that, you know, briefly, but thought, it's probably going to tilt the game a little too hard, and so we weren't weren't too keen on that one. Some people threw about the idea of giving the Germans a couple extra units in Africa, but this is nickel and diming down here, and it's highly unlikely that even if the Germans did start out with a few more units here, they'd be able to reinforce them to any great extent, as the British have a navy here and would be able to shuttle things through. They've got a small navy here as well, so they could bring 4 units down lickety-split and just deal with that problem, and that would be over. So the last thing that you really want to do to many of these sorts of games is add units, because adding units sometimes creates a real imbalance that you really don't want to do. You don't want to wreck the game. So what we kind of came up with we're going to give it a whirl and we'll see how it works. Everyone seems to be in agreement on this, is that the Central Powers are going to get 20 points worth of units that they can place on the board anywhere that they already have units, of course, and it can be any denomination. So you could give all 20 to the Ottomans, or all 20 to the Austria-Hungary, or all to Germany. Okay, but then the Entente gets 12, and they can place those, of course, in order to perhaps counter the 20 that the CP have put in. So we're going to try that today. We're going to do 20 points for the Central Powers. They will place first, and then the Entente will get 12 points of units, and we'll see how that works. We're just spitballing here, folks. We obviously haven't been able to play test it yet. We're just going to try it today. If you have any other ideas, other things that you have done in order to make this a less unbalanced game, I know some people use bid, right? They'll bid, and they'll bid, Germany 12, and they'll get their 12 points worth of stuff just to put on. We didn't really like that too much. We liked having the Entente being able to counter, but we didn't want to give them the same amount, because then we're back to square one. So we figured, the 20 and 12, so it's kind of a 5-to-3 ratio of units, might just help the CP out in the initial couple rounds. We'll see what happens. All right, we'll let you know what the players decide on, and we'll get right back to you. All right, after great deliberation and humming and hawing, the changes that occurred were right here in the center of the board. So what happened was the Austro-Hungarians, for the Central Power money, added 1 artillery to Budapest, 1 artillery to Trieste, and 3 more artillery to Tyrolia. So obviously Italy is going to take the brunt of that money, and so you'll see that the stack of Italian infantry went up 4, which would be the 12 bucks they get to respond with. So we'll see if that really has any huge impact on the game. Hard to tell, because we had $16 going to face off against these 12. So it's basically a 1 die difference. Actually, it's the same dice. It's 4 and 4. So guys, we'll figure out if this really has much of an impact, if it spices up the game a bit. And let me know your thoughts at the bottom. We're not married to this at all. We're just trying something out for fun here in the 2020. So, all right, first round review will be coming up right now. All right, round 1 is in the books, and we'll give you a little write-up, well, talk-up, I guess, of what the first round past participle has brought. How about that? Let's do that. All right, so the Austro-Hungarians, with their few extra artillery that they had, punched into Venice and didn't do all the damage they really wanted to do. And so it remained contested, and of course Piedmont was able to reinforce, so it looks like a typical bloodbath. But they did send 12 infantry this way from Vienna, so the Italians might be in for a bit of hurt there. Of course, Serbia fell, as it typically does. They did kill a couple of Austro-Hungarian troops, though. In fact, did they kill 4? I think they actually killed 4. I think they got 3 1s and a 2 on that, right? Yeah? Yeah, so they lost 4. Romania was taken, though, by the Austro-Hungarians. So you can see they have a good hold on the south. The Russians did something totally different this turn to open the game. And instead of trying to punch in anywhere, they brought everything back, decided to give Poland to the Germans, and stacked everything in Ukraine, because Ukraine, as you can see, touches on some very important territories here. And it can, this big stack here can really reach out and smash someone if it wants to. So Central Power will have to be very careful. Of course, the Russians built their typical 5 men and 2 artillery build, and yeah, there you go. But because the Austro-Hungarians punched into Romania so confidently, the Sevastopolians, who typically will sometimes move in and take Romania, or sometimes even come down here and punch into Mesopotamia, they had to stay put. And so they haven't been able to do much here, and we'll see if Austria-Hungary might actually take them out next round. We'll see what the designs are. I don't think Austria-Hungary wants to attack this stack. That's just my personal opinion, but you can do what you want. But I think that could be a real problem and tie you down. But again, it does tie down the Russian troops as well in Ukraine. But you've got your 2-front war going already. And the Italians, just as a little spoiler here, of course landed in Albania and took that. So Trieste is wide open. And so they're going to have to deal with that, and may have to deal with it continually because the Italians still, of course, have their transports. So we'll see what happens there. Down in the south here, the Brits landed in Transjordan and were able to take it and smashed them without even suffering a casualty. And of course, they scooped Arabia as they are wont to do. They went into Persia. This is a little interesting. They went into Persia and actually failed to take it. But then the troops that were in there, which are considered Turkish troops. Now this is possibly a house rule. You can let me know in the comments below if you agree with this. So we use whatever the closest empire is, of course. You use those units in neutral territories. So we had some Turkish units here. We allowed them to act like Turkish troops, and we allowed them to evacuate into Mesopotamia. Now that gives Britain the territory, but they wouldn't get the money for it because, of course, Britain's already had this turn. We're using the out-of-box rule that says Britain can grow whatever it grow. Listen to me. They can mobilize any units they want in India, except for naval. They can't bring in naval, so what they got is what they got. They can't build any more down here. And so Britain built her whole build down there, and the reason for that is very simply that the German fleet came up and made a what would you say that? A Prussian nuisance of itself? Yeah. A Teutonic? I don't know. Yeah, Teutons weren't known for navy, I guess. But they came in here and hammered the British home fleet and sank it, all for the loss of 2 subs. So that was, or 3 subs. So that was a pretty good trade for them. They also took Holland and suffered 1 casualty, I believe, and they went lock, stock, and smoke and barrels into Belgium. But they left Lorraine alone, because Lorraine, of course, had a bunch of troops in it. So Germany stacked up here, and France's answer was to stack right beside them, and in Picardy, and trying to, yeah, just make sure that doesn't go anywhere. But of course, Germany can head south and coagulate in Lorraine, but then, of course, the French have a decent amount of weaponry to bear there. German's plane was instrumental, by the way, in taking Holland, as it moves all the artillery up to a 4, and that's what helped sweep Holland aside. So the French replied by building a fighter, because they do have a stack of artillery ready to go. They got 8 artillery in the game, and they know that that could be very handy for them. French came up here and parked the battleship there, knowing that the Brits were going to bring some over from Canada. And this is the French Mediterranean fleet. The other thing the French did was they grabbed some guys and brought them down here. The Moroccan walked down, so they're stopping the Germans, who are obviously doing their little German expedition. They might retreat out of here, but we'll see. The British did have some luck down here in Angola. They brought in the infantry from Rhodesia and the 2 units from South Africa, and they got 2 hits right off the bat. So the Germans replied with 1 hit. But there is a German back here who can make a nuisance of himself, but only for 1 round probably. And the Italians, of course, moved there. The British took German East Africa. So some typical stuff, but some atypical. So we're going to see what happens here on round 2. See if Austria-Hungary is going to continue to really try to put the boots to Italy, or will they try to somehow arrange a defense against this massive stack of Russians, who may have to worry about a fairly healthy stack of Germans coming at them as well. We'll let you know right after this. Oh, and one little add-on here is the Americans just didn't spend any money. They're going to wait and see how things go. Alright, round 3 just about to begin. Round 2 has been very exciting. We'll start down here in Asia Minor, and the well, I guess this is where Raiders of the Lost Ark took place, right down in this area down here in the islands. But anyway, the Ottomans decided to try to get rid of the British threat here, because the British on their turn didn't build anything in India, and you'll see why in a moment. And the Ottomans then decided to put the hurt on there. Unfortunately, the Brits were already in here, so that might have been an ill-advised thing, but they did actually get a lot of hits here, and they took care of a British plane. So that could help them out quite a bit. I guess we will see in the next round. Down in Africa, the Germans are almost gone. There's just 2 left in Togo. Togo land, as it's called back then 100 years ago. And the Italians are scooping a buck out of the Belgian Congo. Speaking of the Italians, they decided to head into Serbia, because why not? It was empty. And yeah, so they got that. So they actually made 17 bucks this round. So good for them. Here the Austro-Hungarians went into Sevastopol and got stuck, and the Russians counterattacked and tried to kick them out, but were unable to do so. So that's still contested territory, which knocks the Russians down 3 bucks. But then they equal it up by taking Romania, and now they're on the doorstep of Budapest, which is worth the big 6. The Germans still hold on to Poland, though, as the Russians did not take it. But the Germans came down here into Galicia and are now positioned to go after any of these 3 territories with a pretty decent stack of stuff there. They got about close to 20 units there, and the Austro-Hungarians also have close to 20 units. So the Russians got to be careful here. We are playing with the Russian Revolution rule, so they do have to be careful about that. People were asking about economic collapse. We're not playing with that with this one here. We got some noobs, so we're going to just be playing with the whole idea that you go after 2 of the capitals. The Entente have to capture Berlin and 1 other capital, and the Central Powers have to capture Paris or London and 1 other capital. So we're just going to stick with that, keep it simple. The Austro-Hungarian Navy came down here, tired of the Italians moving things around, and actually won the battle. Left with a damaged battleship, however. And we'll see how that goes, because the British player forgot to go over here and attack that thing. But maybe the Brit didn't want to lose. Yeah, I think he didn't want to lose his cruiser, possibly, and then lose his transport here as well. Possibly to the Ottomans. So we'll see what happens there. So that's the picture down here in Asia Minor. That's the picture here on the Eastern Front. Alright, so the Italians have a very small force here, just 3 units. They'll probably get wiped out by the Austro-Hungarians this round. But then the Russians can reply here with a sizable force. That's a stack of 8 men and 4 artillery, so that's 12 units. And of course they've got their larger stack there. Russia bought a plane this last round because they do have a number of artillery, and as we know, fighters really help with that. in a battle. The Austro-Hungarians bought a plane as well, so I think that's what the Russians were looking at. Over here in Italy, the Italians punched hard into the Austro-Hungarians, did a ton of damage, but couldn't dislodge them fully. And the Austro-Hungarians are going to have a decision to make here. Up here in France, the French were able to kick the Germans out of Lorraine, and took some damage doing it, but the Germans still have a monstrous stack of stuff here, which is now only 2 steps from Paris. So that might not work out for them. The French may have to go on the offensive sooner than they wanted to. But the Brits built 4 transports here, so they can transport 8 units this next round. And they do have 8 units raring to go. So they could transport them anywhere from Holland to Kiel. Could go into Belgium, that'd be kind of suicidal unless the Germans are gone by then. Or they could reinforce Picardy. So 8 more units, not sure if that'll make a huge difference, but we'll find out. Down here, the French, not sure if I covered this already, but the French went and bulked up here against the Germans in Togoland. And over here, the Americans just saved their money. That's why there's nothing there. So the Americans are sitting on, after 2 rounds, they start with 20. Then they got 20 at the end of round 1 and 20 at the end of round 2. So they got $60. And I think they were waiting to see what happened with all of this. And maybe they just wanted to make the perfect build. So, alright folks, well that is it for the wrap up of round 2. This looks like it's going to be very interesting. We'll find out if the Germans put the hammer down, head into Picardy, and then get flanked by Lorraine, or if they smash into Lorraine and get flanked by Picardy. 6 of one, half dozen the other, I guess. Or maybe they just move more guys to the front and then attack next turn. But I think they got to get moving here before the Americans come on over. Alright folks, we'll let you know what happens on turn 3 right after this. Alright, turn 3 is done. We're going to look at turn 4 here, or the opening turn 4. This is what's happened. Well, this was very interesting down here in the Middle East. What happened was the British didn't advance into Mesopotamia. They didn't have enough horses there and didn't want to throw away what they had. And so they just stayed there, and they built a very modest build of 4 units here, figuring that the Ottoman was fairly spent. But then the Ottoman turned and came into the Syrian desert, wiped them out, sent 1 guy down here, took that, and then charged out of the capital into Smyrna, and didn't do quite as well as they wanted to, but they took down a number of the British troops there. So they've kind of secured their homeland for the next, or for that round anyway, and now they're a legitimate threat to the British. Over here, the British are going to have to bring some people to Transjordan, or they're going to risk losing that. And they'll probably move into Mesopotamia here, but again, the Turks have a little answer here for them. So, the Turks, good for them, have stood up to the onslaught. Only had $15, so they built 5 guys in Constantinople. You can see the Italians, cheeky little buggers that they are, came into Serbia earlier and then into Bulgaria this round. The Austro-Hungarians took Albania, and then they had to spread their forces out here because of that small contingent in Serbia, that Italian contingent. Over here we had the Austro-Hungarians and the Russians fight to a stalemate here a couple of times in Romania. And the Sevastopol Guards stayed put, not knowing what those Turks that were here were going to do, so they decided to stay there. The Russians decided to go for it, and they punched into Galicia here against that big stack of Germans, and they did all right. That fighter really helped them out. All 3 of their artillery hit. And in Poland, you'll see that lone German that's been sitting there since round 1 is destroyed as the Russians sent everything they could into there, causing, of course, the Germans to send last turn's build this way. They really didn't want to, but they had to. On the Italian front, Austro-Hungary has finally taken the thing they've been fighting over the entire time. It's Venice, and the only reason they now own it is because the Italians retreated. They sent everybody out of there in order to bulk up and hopefully have enough to withstand a push here. But you can see the Austro-Hungarians have a good stack of artillery and they have a plane, so the Italians had to build a plane to answer that, to at least give them a chance. Because if Austro-Hungary has that plane and there's nothing to shoot it down, not only do they get that little cheeky strafing run, all the artillery turns into 66% chance of hitting. So they're hoping to avoid that. Up top here, the British, doing as the British do with their fleet, have taken a couple of empty territories. They avoided the mines. It's always very risky to come into the port area of the enemy. But the Brits said, let's do it. Let's try to slow down this German juggernaut. The guys in Kiel are obviously dead. Holland may or may not actually get attacked. They might just bypass it. Here's a big story. The Germans had a monstrous stack there, and the French came by and sent everything they possibly could at it, and had some success. And then the Germans had a good punch back, but now the Germans do have some reinforcements that are right here, ready to come in. They did lose their fighter to the French fighter, but they do have a replacement fighter that's able to make it, as they can move too. So we'll see what happens there. If the Germans have some good success here, Paris is right next door. Now the Brits landed 6 units last turn, and they'll probably be able to land as many as they want, up to 10 this turn. So don't know if Paris is really under that much strain, but we'll see as things go on. In Africa, well, the Germans have now settled down into Nigeria, denying the Brits that $1, but also losing all of their African territories. So they're surrounded by the French, and who knows if this might be the last round for the Germans, as the French start to bulk up a bit on German colonies. And finally, the Americans. Next turn will be able to move, so they built themselves 6 transports and 4 artillery, which leaves them with $8, and so they have $28 for next round. But now they can bring over 12 units, and they can land here in Africa and then move across, or they can go north. They'll probably be moving north to help out the beleaguered French capital. The Russians definitely have much more breathing room now. They don't have a ton of stuff, but they do have more than what Germany has right now on this front. So we'll see what happens here as we go on with the rest of the game. This is round 4 coming up, and we'll see what happens. And it looks like it's all over but the crying here. The Central Powers have decided to call it quits, and there is a chance that they might be able to salvage something here, but they had a couple of real reverses here. We'll talk about them, and you can leave your thoughts in the comments below whether or not they should have kept going. The Ottoman have cleaned out most of the British here, actually. They're looking a little healthier, and you know, they're still not up where they need to be competitive here, but they've done all right. But the Brits built 3 tanks down here, and they've still got 4 units, and they've got the transports to move everybody around. So never know what that might bring about. Africa is Africa. Not much going on there. But over here, the Italians came in and actually took this last round, you may remember. So the Turks came up and were only able to get rid of 2 of them, so it's contested territory. Austria-Hungary has solidified its own borders, sort of. But they pushed into Italy, got into Tuscany with a good stack, and then absolutely got shredded. They even had the aircraft air cover, and I think they got like 3 hits or something, and the Italians hit with almost every single thing and just destroyed them. So that's it for that. British cruiser came in and took care of that. Naples, you can see, is still under Austro-Hungarian rule, but without a transport. Oh, you should have taken that off of there probably a couple turns ago. Anyway, things that don't really come into play too often. Damaged battleships in this game, for one. Over here, we've got the Germans and the Russians, and the Germans again here, just no luck with the dice at all. Swing and a miss. The Russians came pouring into here, and it was ugly. There were even Austro-Hungarian troops in here backing them up. They all got wiped out, and the Russians barely took any damage at all. Same in Romania here. The Russians just plowed in, and the Austro-Hungarians, ice cold dice, just terrible. The Germans were able to punch into Poland, and they've got some backup coming. But it's just not going to matter. There's just too much Russian stuff here. So the Russian front is pretty much a lost cause. Unless Germany poured everything into Silesia this next round, which they could, they can't stop the Russians. And over here, the Germans had a huge stack of stuff in here, and the French counterpunch, along with the British counterpunch, and 10 British units landing here. In Belgium, behind the German line, cutting their line of support. Here's a couple of German stacks here, well, one stack and one lone guy moving in. But now that Austria-Hungary isn't putting any pressure on the Italians, just doesn't look likely that there's anything that the Central Powers can do. They can always regroup and start to get going again, but by then, lots of bad things are happening for them. For instance, we have 12 fresh units coming over here. Didn't even bother putting on the US build because the Central Powers just said forget it. So the US build, yeah, will probably come into here, land in Albania. You got 12 units there now that the Austro-Hungarians just simply cannot deal with. You got a British fleet here that's going to come up and protect those American transports. He didn't even move the stuff over there. There you go. Lazy. But it's one of those things when it's a foregone conclusion, you just decide to pack it in. So thanks for watching, folks. We may revisit this 20 and 12. Maybe we'll do 20 and 6 or something. I don't know. We got to figure something out though, because the just did not work out well at all today. The dice were terrible for a couple of big battles for the Germans and Austria-Hungary. So when you get shredded like that, when you're kind of expecting to have a different outcome, you know, it's a little disappointing. The little minor battles, yeah, I take them as they come, but when you've got 30 dice you're rolling and you only get 2 hits, and then you take 10 or 12 hits, that's a game changer. So we'll revisit this again. Look forward to your comments below. Let me know if you've come up with any great rules that keep the Central Powers alive longer than 4 rounds. This one did go a little quickly because the German player decided to kind of put all his eggs in one basket, and it didn't work out for him. So let us know in the comments below. And as always, hug your loved ones. Tell your friends that they're important to you. And may those dice be with you.